Today's conversation is about big donors and democracy, how philanthropy is transforming with the engagement of the super rich and the social and political impacts of this change. To delve in the subject, we have with us a specialist from New York who has been dedicated to studying in depth for years those who donate to which causes and why. Editor and writer David Callahan is the author of The Givers Wealth, Power, and Philanthropy in a New Gilded Age, a book that portrayed top philanthropists such as Michael Bloomberg and Mark Zuckerberg. David Callahan is also the man who created Inside Philanthropy, a platform to pull back the curtain on one of the most powerful and dynamic forces shaping society today, as it is described in the website insidephilanthropy.com. Years after being launched, this is still one of the most relevant online destinations for people willing to dive deeper in the charitable culture, and you could not miss the chance to do the same. We are really honored to have the man himself with us today. Welcome, David, and thank you so much for dedicating part of your time to this conversation.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
In your book, you give great examples of billionaires donating money to a specific cause and the impact made by it. Do you think it's more efficient to philanthropists and donors to put all the energy and money in one or a few causes, or is better to spend it more broadly?
I think it's better to really focus. I mean, even the philanthropists with the most amount of money, they recognize that their resources are limited in the grand scheme of things. So, compared to government or compared to business, that philanthropy really needs to be used in a strategic way to try to have impact, and it's easier to do that if you're focused narrowly. So Bill Gates is a great example. He's no longer the richest person in the world, but for a long time he was, and uh, has had for many years the biggest philanthropy in the world, the Gates Foundation. But even the Gates Foundation, recognized early on that it needed to be pretty focused and stay focused to have an impact. So the Gates Foundation has devoted almost all their resources to global health and development. They have also have a program on U.S. education, but they haven't gone off and, despite all the money that the Gates Foundation has, they haven't gone off and funded in a whole bunch of different areas. You're not going to find them. They're not a climate change funder. They're not a big anti-poverty funder. There's a lot of issues, most issues that they don't work on because they want to stay focused and pretty narrow. And I think one thing that happens with philanthropists is that they end up having all these different interests. They want to do this, they want to do that. They end up with 5, 6, 7, 10 different kind of priorities. And then it's hard to really concentrate enough resources on any of those priorities to have an impact. So yes, pick a focus or a couple key issues you really care about and stick with it.
And David, now I would like to understand why social causes and philanthropy are commonly associated with the Democratic Party in the US, or at least with progressive political views. Here in Brazil, we have something like that, but linking to the left side of the political spectrum. Now, how can this narrative affect the entire sector? And do you think there is a difference in the way progressives and conservatives think and act when it comes to donation?
I think that both people on the left and the right with money in the United States have a long history of trying to use their wealth to advance their ideology and their values. So, on the right side of the spectrum, there's many conservative philanthropists and foundations that have given a lot of money to advance the causes they care about, banning abortion, cutting regulation, trying to reinstate the traditional family. There's a whole set of conservative think tanks and conservative legal groups that are funded by right-wing billionaires. Charles Koch is well known and good example, but there's a bunch of others, and that money has been very influential. It's had a lot of, when you give money to influence public policy, it can have a big impact, and it certainly has in the United States with all these conservative think tanks. However, at the same time, there's a lot of money on the liberal and left side of the spectrum, and more all the time, in fact, there's many billionaires who are quite liberal, like George Soros, for example, who bankrolls the Open Society Foundations, which is involved in many progressive causes in the United States. And so, we tend to think in the classic Karl Marx analysis, wealthy people are part of the kind of conservative party, not big backers of liberal causes, but that's actually not the way it plays out. In the United States, you have wealthy people on both sides of these big ideological battles.
And how about difference between generations, like boomers versus millennials or versus Gen Z? What change we can expect in the next few years?
Yeah, yeah, great question. I think that uh, we're seeing a big transfer of wealth to younger generations as baby boomers kind of age out and start to transfer their wealth to their kids. And that money is going to millennials and Gen Z. And, so you have a fair number of people in their 20s and their 30s who are inheriting a lot of money and are engaged in philanthropy. And there's things about these donors that are different than how their parents give away money. So often you'll have a parent that will donate to civic institutions. They give money to their alumni, their university that they went to. They give money to the museum. They give money to some human service organizations. And then the kids come along and take over the family foundation or get their hands on the money. And they often want to do things differently. They want to give to social justice organization. They want to give to take on climate change. Often kids are more progressive politically than their parents and more interested in backing social justice causes. And the other thing is that young people are often more interested in using money for social investing, to impact investing in companies that try to both make money and make the world a better place. And so that is an area where you see young heirs often focusing attention. And in both respects, that's different than how parents often operate.
And David, to conclude this conversation, here comes the main issue. In previous interviews, you have noted that the impact of the actions coming from the wealthy people might affect democracy. Can you take us deeper in this statement, please?
Yeah, so we have, in the United States, this ideal that the people exercise power based upon voting and other forms, protests, petitions, except that it's just true that money is a way to amplify your voice in civic life and philanthropy. And there's two ways you can use, if you're rich, there's two ways you can use your money to have an impact on what government does or how your society is structured. You can give money to politicians. You can help get candidates elected uh, and affect elections and electoral outcomes with your money. So money in politics, people are very familiar with that, and they know it's a problem that wealthy people have this big voice in our political system because they can make big campaign donations. But I, in my work, have shown all the ways that philanthropy can also be used to have a lot of influence over what government does. You can give money to think tanks. You can give money to activist organizations. You can give money to legal groups. You can give money to voter mobilization groups that mobilize specific kinds of voters. And all of this can be done while you're getting a charitable tax deduction for your giving, right? So this is a way that if you're wealthy, you can amplify your voice. You can basically convert your money into influence in our democracy. And I think that that's problematic because, in a democracy, people shouldn't have a bigger voice just because they have a lot of money. And so while we like this idea of philanthropy, we like philanthropic freedom, we like the idea that donors can have a lot of choice in what they give their money to. It is philanthropy has become, in some ways, another form of money in politics, and that's just something we need to understand when we look at how these billionaire donors are operating, and also other foundations, private foundations that are often involved in philanthropy that's pretty politically focused. And I think with the billionaire philanthropists in particular, there's concern because these people already have so much power. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, who runs Facebook, and Jeff Bezos, who runs Amazon, they have a lot of power through their companies. So the idea that they're also using philanthropy to influence our lives and to make choices about how our society is run is just troubling.
And how to prevent these collateral damages?
Well, it's not easy because we embrace the idea of philanthropic freedom in the United States, that we want there to be not too much regulation of philanthropy. And so we don't want a bunch of rules about what philanthropists can and cannot spend their money on. At the same time, if we're serious about regulating the influence of wealth in politics, and we want to reduce the role of money in shaping our democracy, we have to find ways. We have to understand that philanthropy is a form of money in politics, and we have to find ways to limit how much influence it can have, or certainly find ways to reduce the tax deductible forms of philanthropic giving that basically are political giving. Because in the United States, you're not you're not allowed to get a tax deduction if you give money to a political candidate. Yet you can get a tax deduction by giving money to a nonprofit organization that helps a political candidate unofficially. And I think that we need to look more closely at how to kind of reduce the influence of that sort of giving.
David, thank you so much for this conversation. We tend to celebrate all donations, and we have shown us the importance of taking more critical look at them, either to reflect and warn us about the policy implications, or even to win more donations by understanding the motivation of donors. We appreciate it very much.
Great to be with you today. Thank you.